Good morning and welcome to Wednesday Weavings, activating our authentic purpose in an era of great change. This is the last of a four-part series in May of 2020, and I'm calling this my Millennial Edition. I have the great honor today of having Kumiko Hayashi from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Sedona, Arizona, who's now in the Amazons, joining us here today. She's a visionary filmmaker and an environmentalist that has been doing amazing work. And we're going to start our session today with just finding out what the shelter in place has been like for Kumiko. So, good morning, Kumiko, and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
And where are you this morning?
I'm currently in Ecuador, in the northern region of the Amazon rainforest.
And how did you end up there for I'm calling it shelter in place or quarantine, but how did you end up there during this pandemic?
Yeah, actually, I was in Sedona in the Southwest back in February, and then I was planning to come back here to continue working on several different projects, the documentary, and I left. It was, I believe, 3 days before the pandemic hit. So when I arrived to Ecuador, everything was still open, and then just a few days later, the world started, taking action and shutting down airports and different things. So I ended up, here in this small house in the Amazon. And yeah, I've been here ever since, and very grateful. I have, lots of nature, fresh air around me, and still able to connect to the internet and the Western world in this small home. So it's actually been quite nice being here in nature since it started.
It's indeed a blessing. And I think if any place in the world is going to teach us the miracles and magic of nature, it's in the Amazon region. And I know a lot of your work is going to address that as we continue. So the theme of this May series for me was to have conversations with people about the shelter in place experience, and more importantly, Kumiko, what has emerged, if anything, has anything emerged within you during this SIP, as I'm calling it? And I'll just leave it at that. I think you know about the imaginal cell image as the caterpillar goes through its metamorphosis and becomes the butterfly. That is this experience of emerging. And I'm wondering if you've had an experience like that in Ecuador in the last couple of months.
Yeah, great question. It's interesting for me because I've been working independently for the past 5 years. So I haven't had a 9-to-5 job. So when people started having to stay in their homes, that's normally where I work from anyways. So it wasn't, such a dramatic change. But what did make a difference was that I could no longer go out. Here in Ecuador, they've had strict rules where you could only leave once a week for groceries, no buses, no public transportation. Many people had to, walk to get supplies. So with that in place, I had restrictions on my ability to travel. And for me, I have this hummingbird spirit where I usually jump very quickly from place to place as I'm working from home. So, these past 3 months having to, stay in one location has allowed me this great opportunity where I've been able to really, see within. It's like seeing a mirror, having to, really do everything from here. Certain tendencies come up, irritability, just these human tendencies that we have when we're not able to do our normal routine. And I started realizing that I was blaming my external circumstances, like, oh my gosh, I can't leave and travel, and so I'm just so upset about this person or that thing. And then I was able to, through my meditation, realize, everything around me is a reflection of myself. So by then taking full responsibility that I have complete control over my emotions, my feelings, and my ultimate reality around me, I began to make a determination to and my happiness. And so I was then able to, really hone in on my goals and my dreams and my visions. And when something would come up that would bother me, I would immediately take responsibility to do some sort of action to then change my environment. And so I'm really appreciative of these 3 months, because I've been able to see that I have complete control over my reality. And before, when something would bother me, I would just get up and move and leave. And it's almost like a kind of escapism. Yeah. So it's been great. It's been awesome to be able to really hone in on myself and take the opportunity.
I love that. I just want to just stay in a moment of pause with all that wisdom you just shared, and with all the interviews I've had in this last month. I think you have encapsulated what some of the visionaries and spiritual teachers and masters, if you will, have been sharing on different summits that I've either moderated this past month or been a participant in. In certain parts of the Western world, some people are calling this the Great Pause, this period of time that we're in. There's also some discussion that that's a position of privilege, that you actually have this moment or this period of time, this great pause, for this inner reflection, for the wisdom that you've just described. Not complaining is what I've heard, taking responsibility, realizing that you have the power within to direct your reality and experience your reality. I'm so happy to hear you share it in that way, because regardless of the theories out there and what's going on and the polarization that has occurred, to be able to build our inner resilience, our personal resilience, I think has been a great opportunity for this time. For me, I have definitely deepened my purpose. I am so clear, and I felt that when this happened, it's like, now's the time. Now's the time to really make the contributions in my immediate and immediate community and the collective. So that's what I'm really doing as well. I wanted to comment on the hummingbird, because the hummingbird is actually one of my spirit animals. She's also quite magic. The hummingbird is, for me, a symbol of flexibility and agility and adaptability. So that's part of that freedom. But I definitely relate with the hummingbird moving about. I've done quite a bit of that in my life. So we share that animal spirit, most definitely. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So a couple other questions for you. Was there anything you had to, I know you're in Ecuador in the Amazon and you're not here, with the 9-to-5 job, which most people that have been part of this series aren't either. They're all visionaries in their own sense. But was there anything you had to pivot? And by pivot, I mean do a reinvention in adapting to these last 2 months or 3 months, just in the I think you've shared it, but is there anything else? For example, a lot of people are now offering their gifts and services online. Just wondering if there was any kind of a pivot that has occurred for you.
Yeah, great. One quote I really love that I heard, I think it was off of a Numi tea tag, and it said, "Nature never hurries, and yet she gets everything done on time." So going back to what you're saying about this great pause, for me, it's been an acceptance of doing things at a slower pace. And for instance, with the documentary that I'm making, I've been editing it from my house, and usually I like to work with others and have, someone near me to keep motivated when it comes to computer work. And since I've been here, I've had to, do that on my own. And I go sometimes through these periods where I just work for like 6 or 7 hours. I forget to eat. And I just get totally immersed in this creative process.
Wow.
But since I've been here, I've actually pivoted that and transformed that. And I've been able to set up a routine where I'm, waking up at 6 a.m. and doing my meditation, having breakfast, working, and then forcing myself to stop, go outside, take a walk in nature, maybe make a phone call to encourage somebody that I know, and just having a slower routine. So I've had to just accept that the process of creating, in terms of editing, it's slow. But then after looking back from 3 months, I've realized, wow, I've actually accomplished so much and been able to have a healthy lifestyle at the same time. So if anything, it's allowed me to create a routine in the most wonderful way where I really can look, what do I want to incorporate in one day? Meditation, yoga, healthy diet, eating, 4 hours of work, and just accept it and not have to feel like I need to rush, get done, and just no need for rushing. I think so many of us feel like we need to, especially with our creative and visionary projects, like get them done quickly. And, I think each one has its own divine time. So that's something I've been able to do recently, in these past few months.
I love that. I just love the wisdom that you're sharing. The not rushing. And you also mentioned something that I think is very, very important. And it is about discipline. It's about routine. It's about creating structure within our freedom, within our spirit, within our space. Years ago, I studied with Gabrielle Roth, who created an amazing practice, movement practice called 5 Rhythms. I was one of her very first students in her teacher training. And one quote, she's got many, but one quote that has stayed with me my entire life is that it takes a lot of discipline to be a free spirit. And and I think that's what I'm hearing you say in some ways. To be in your full creative expression, you've described the kind of discipline that it's taken. And I think that's the segue I want to move into now, because I know that you have been working on a massive project that I want to share a bit with everyone. The question is actually, what are you celebrating as a result of our great pause? And my guess is that you're celebrating the trailer of The Roots Awaken. Can you tell us a little bit about The Roots Awaken?
Yeah, great. So 5 years ago, I had the opportunity to go to a gathering here in Ecuador. For those who don't know where that is, it's in South America.
Ooh.
It means the equator. So it's on, 0 latitude. It's the center of our earth. And there's a place called Kochaski, which is an ancient site with many pyramids that are still buried under the ground. and it's pre-Incan, so it's, you know, even older than the Incan Empire. So there was a gathering there where indigenous leaders, activists, you know, people from all races, all colors came together to pray for world peace for 4 days, which is opening this new cycle. Bless you. This new cycle of the basically the fifth world, the fifth cycle of humanity. And so at the time, I really didn't know a whole lot about indigenous ceremony or these prophecies. And I showed up, and there was other youth, but there was many more elders. And it was really just such a blessing to be around so much wisdom. So from this gathering, I had this vision that I wanted to make a film, understand the realities that the indigenous people are living. You know, I think it's something around 30% of territory is indigenous, and yet they make up less than 5% of the world's population. And so not many people know what's really going on in these territories. So I decided to go. I thought it would be a couple months of me filming, and it turned out to be several years where I would actually live, you know, 4 to 6 months, come back to the States, to Sedona, and then go back. So I was, you know, constantly moving. I was able to visit over 15 tribes, and many hours of footage, a huge collection with what I call visual anthropology, because there was no intervention. It was complete observation of what they were doing. And I got the opportunity to film many ceremonies and celebrations that have, some of them have never actually been filmed before. They're very sensitive about, you know, this filming of these ceremonies. So I was able to get trust where they kind of saw, like, okay, you're a messenger or a hummingbird. You're going to bring this message to the north in a good way. And they could see my intention was very sincere. So anyways, I've been working on that now. It's been 5 years since that, you know, original vision happened at that gathering for world peace. And yes, you know, the film is coming to a close. It's going to come out in 2020 for the world to see. So I've been editing that and working with some people to bring this to, you know, to its finish. And yeah, it's basically a film that's focusing now on the importance of the Amazon rainforest. So I went to many tribes and many villages, but I had to hone it into one, you know, specific focus. So basically it, you know, shares my journey coming from this world peace gathering from the Andes down into the Amazon, which is the world's most biodiverse place here in Ecuador. It's the point where the Andes meets the Amazon, and all of the water that's basically born that goes into the Amazon River, it comes from here. And there was a huge oil dump back in 1963. Chevron, or Texaco, which is now Chevron, dumped over 18 billion gallons of toxic oil waste, which is actually the largest oil disaster, much greater than the Gulf of Mexico. And the Amazon is the lungs of our planet. So, you know, our world's water and oxygen that we breathe in the United States and in Arizona comes in some way or another from the cycles of the Amazon. So it was just alarming to see, wow, how come nobody knows, like, this is happening? And then just 2 weeks ago, there was another spill of one of the pipelines running over the major river in the Amazon, and spilled into the river, and now there's over 22,000 families that have no access to clean drinking water. So amongst this pandemic, you know, there's many other environmental things that are happening. So basically that's the reality, but the Roots Awaken is actually this call of hope, because there are indigenous people that are uniting across boundaries, and through their traditional medicines, through their spirituality, they're actually able to transcend past, present, and future, and they're able to do tremendous work that has allowed very great victories. One of the tribes here, the Kofan, they were the ones affected by the oil, and they took this case to court, and they won. This is actually against a mining company that came in, because the oil that passed, but they're still affected by it. And they won this great victory, and then they're uniting with the local tribes. And so what's happening is this unification, and there's young people that are rising up as leaders of their communities saying now is the time as stewards of the rainforest for us to, you know, tell the world what's happening and for them to respect us. So the best thing we can do as Westerners is just accept that the indigenous people living there are stewards, and support and empower them. And, you know, the direct answer to the oil is just no more extraction of oil in the Amazon. I know our society is dependent on oil today, but you know, the Amazon's the last place that we should be extracting oil from. You know, we should keep it off. So we say keep the oil in the ground there. And then just the last point I want to share is in one of the collective ceremonies we had with the indigenous leaders, a vision came through an ayahuasca ceremony that there is already an alternative form of energy, a free form of energy that's not nuclear, that's not disastrous, that actually hundreds of thousands of years ago, ancient civilizations have already tapped into. And then there's some people who have already, you know, aware of this, but humanity doesn't, as a society, we don't know about it. And, you know, there's a lot more into this, but there are solutions out there. So it's time for us to awaken, you know, that we are all indigenous to this earth. We're all part of this planet, and we're all stewards and responsible for where we live, and, you know, supporting those who are living in ancient territories like the Amazon rainforest is what it's about. So
I love this.
Yeah, I hope that it actually brings courage, you know, and hope to people.
Well, we're going to take a look at the trailer a little bit later, but you've touched upon so many points that, you know, resonate with my purpose, with my heart. I was in the Amazons actually in the 80s, and I traveled across the Amazon River from Iquitos all the way to Belém. And that's a story that I will share in another format and another time. But I joined an organization they're headquartered in San Francisco, but they've done a lot of work with the Achuar, which you may or may not have heard of, but also in the Ecuador region, but right where Ecuador, Brazil, and Colombia all come together in that region. And they've made great strides at preserving that area. So I first joined a Pachamama Alliance, I think it was back in like 2003 or 4, and I became the editor of the Sustainable World Sourcebook. So I got very, very passionate about this. And so when I met you and saw the work you were doing, it's like, I wanted to support you in everywhere possible, because really what you're talking about, Kumiko, is sacred activism. And I was on another summit just this past weekend, again, moderating about community resiliency and sacred activism. But it's one thing to have a really strong spiritual practice and a connection with that and our source, which I heard you share earlier. And it's another thing to then take that wisdom, that knowledge, that connection, and offer it out for the sake of others, for all species, for Gaia, for the planet. And that's exactly what you're doing. And actually one of the speakers, Andrew Harvey, said, if we're not doing that, and if we're just doing our spiritual practices, that we're actually, this was very radical what he said, we're actually practicing a form of narcissism. I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just saying that he made it, emphasized how important it is in this time to have that deep practice that you do, and that connection to source, but to take it out into the world. Thich Nhat Hanh said the same thing about engaged spirituality. The Hinayana monk that was doing peaceful protest during the Vietnam War. So I'm so inspired about your work as it relates to sacred activism and what I call community resiliency. I mean, we're saving these communities and tribes, and educating the world on the importance of this region.
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that you spend time in the Amazon, and I think anybody that has been there can relate to its beauty and the magic and just the life force energy. You know, there's just so much life,
Right.
all sorts, plants, animals, insects, and so it's a different vibration there. And then those who haven't been there, who've seen videos or heard of it, like can, you know, be in a sense in awe of what lies there. So, you know, it's needed everywhere. And I think this spirituality you're talking about, this sense of self, you know, is something that is activating at this certain time for many of us. And once we activate that, we then can connect in a different way with our environment, whether you're in the Southwest in the desert, or, you know, in Oregon in the forest, or the Amazon. There's a different relationship you start having with your natural environment. And then also, like you said, the importance of sharing with others. This is not the time of the monk in the cave, you know, this is the time of interconnectedness. And there's a tribe, the Kogi of the Sierra Nevada in Colombia, that, you know, are very sacred, all white. They're one of the few tribes that hasn't been invaded by Europeans. So basically they never had Western contact. But recently they've decided themselves leave their sacred territory and start speaking out to what they call their little brothers and sisters, which are us, about what's happening to Mother Earth. And so, you know, they're in New York City, they're in different places giving talks and connecting with leaders. And I think of them as coming out of the cave, because they quite literally have some, you know, medicine people or wise elders that spend time in caves meditating to connect with Gaia and Mother Earth. And they said, this can't continue doing this spiritual practice alone because of the state of the world. So maybe at some point in the past that was okay for certain spiritual beings to have their own practice. But even the Kogi say this is not working in today's time, because if we don't start connecting with one another, sooner or later we're not going to have a planet Earth to share, you know, oxygen and fresh water. So that's why if anyone cares about the environment or the state of our planet or humanity, it's so important to engage in dialogue and connect, like what we're doing today. You know, this talk, it's an example of connecting and spreading information. So thank you again for the opportunity to share this.
Oh my God, no, I met one of the Kogi leaders that came to Sedona not too long ago. So I'm familiar with the origins and the tribe and the practices, and what they're calling for now in collaboration with those who feel called to join that. So this is so inspiring. Again, before we move into your trailer, I'm wondering if you have any advice to share for others on what can we do? What can we do with respect to our personal resiliency and our planetary, our community resiliency? Just, you know, if you had 3 tips to share with, okay, this is what we can do as a species, as humanity. Yeah, if you were to offer just what you have learned in this 5-year journey that you've been on, and all of your time in with Indigenous peoples, just what are 3 jewels that you would like to share with others so that we can become more sacred activists?
Yeah, one point is local, you know, we consume as society so much, and food, clothing, all of this comes from some origin, right? So one of the things I've learned, especially with Indigenous people, is their food comes majority from their local environment. So many of us, I don't mean going to your local Whole Foods. I mean, connecting with the local farmers in your region and the foods that are in season at that time. I mean, there's so many farmers markets out there. You just go on Google and type in farmers market. And, I know right now maybe that it's different with the pandemic, but there's ways to get connected with people who are growing locally. So the more that we can, consume from our local environment and starting our own gardens, whether it's just a couple herbs in a pot on the porch or whatever, is one of the best ways everyone on this planet can help ourselves and also society. I know my brother and his girlfriend, they just started, 3 garden beds. They're in Phoenix. So they're in, downtown suburbs, and they've had amazing produce recently. They've been able to get peppers and squash, and so they're feeling like, oh, I'm connected to Mother Earth because they watch that grow for months, and then when they eat it, they're not going to eat it fast. They're like, oh my gosh, like I almost don't want to eat it because I saw it growing for so many months.
I love that you. Yeah, I love that you say that about, it's just as tip number one, first of all, localize in your exchange of currency, in supporting local commerce, and most importantly, localize with your food and water source. So that I've also been working on that here in Sedona, and I started it back in the Bay Area, but the Community Resiliency Project, and we've got 80 people that want to have community gardens, and we're working on what does that look like. And it's a much longer conversation, but I love that you're saying that, and it's amazing how much food you can grow in the desert, which I'm quickly learning about. So localize, grow your food, absolutely. Have some sovereignty in that arena. Be involved in seed exchanges as well. And I know that's also an important indigenous practice and has been for millennia. So do you have a jewel number 2, a tip number 2 for how we can move more into sacred activism?
The second one I would say is community. So indigenous people, they're so beautiful because they really have nailed in this aspect of community. When you go to an indigenous community, there's a different sense about things. It's like funny when you go to, a restaurant, maybe you're having a drink with, a friend or whatnot. I don't know if you drink alcohol or not, but everyone's got their individual drink, right? In the Amazon here, they have a drink called chicha. It's almost like a fermented kombucha, has like a little bit of like alcohol to it, but they have one gourd, and they go around, they share it to each and every person, and then the person serving drinks last. And I'm just like, wow, they really have this spirit of supporting everyone else that's around them first, and that they're not like, oh, I mean, I know now maybe they probably aren't sharing the same gourd with the pandemic, but that's okay. It's okay. They've got their own words. But yeah, it's just a sense of like, we're all interconnected. Like, I'm not separate from you. You're not separate from me. So wherever you are, creating your community, it could be your closest friends and family, it could be your spiritual group, your yoga group or whatever, but just having, this kind of ongoing relationship and starting to create a base from that community. Now with the Zooming, we're able to, create a sense of community across borders through video chat, which is great that we have. But also, just locally, calling up the people that in your local region, and just keeping, like you said, you guys are starting a garden, gardening together.
Trying.
So finding people that have common interests. I mean, not all of us are going to have the same interest or, wanting to do whatever, and it's just important to find people that are like-minded. So finding your niche and community is a second one that I would say.
Fabulous. And I just want to add some to that, because I love what you said about the drinking from the same vessel is what I saw that happening, and creating that circle of life, I think is what is described in that particular practice. And it is common in many, many, many other cultures. And you said something also really important too about, reaching out to like-minded. I'm going to take that just a step further. It's important to have conversations with people that aren't like-minded. to express curiosity, to understand their values, because it's where everything starts with dialogue. And another summit I was in on Saturday, just talking about community and food, there was an individual who, he lived in an apartment complex or a condo, I don't know what it was, but there were a lot of units all together where people didn't really know each other or talk to each other. And he started to go around to every single door, introduce himself, and he offered to collect food scraps. What he did with those food scraps within a month, and without HOA restrictions, which is another obstacle, but he was able to create a compost that then contributed to the beginning of a community garden. And within 3 months, that whole community transformed. The relationships transformed. People knew each other. Those that were living alone no longer felt alone. Phone calls were being made to make sure they had what they needed. And that's part of what I've also tried to do here in Sedona, especially during the shelter in place. There's a lot of people here that live alone. And, different groups have stepped forward to do deliveries, but I also just starting a phone bank, just that conversation is so important when people, especially when people are isolated, because we are a species that is not designed to be isolated. We are an interconnected species, like you said. And you said earlier too, this isn't the time of meditating and of doing things alone. That time of the lone wolf is very much over. And building community, even with our differences, I think that's key. Because we can't expect everyone to be the same. But start where you are, right? Find 1, 2, 3 other 4 people that are committed and build it, and they will come, right? Yeah. And so treasure number 3. You have treasure number 3. What would you share in these times? So,
I would say treasure number 3 is believe in yourself and believe in your greatest potential. We as human beings are so powerful that we're only using such a small percentage actually of our full capacity. I think many of us have heard something like that before. So just believe in yourself, believe in your capacity and your potential, in whatever it is. I have to wake up and remind myself of that every single day, and to the point that we're so powerful, we can actually, make it rain. Like there are people in indigenous cultures who've had practices of weather keeping where they can actually invoke a change in the clouds and the climate. That's how powerful human beings are. And we all, I believe, are equal. We all have the same capacity for a heightened life condition. And so, there's no difference between you or me or anybody else. And so believing in yourself, and then to take that a step further, if you're interested to expand something in yourself, just education, so much material out there, reading books, movies, documentaries, talks, online classes. So believe in yourself and your capacity, and then go out there and start researching and educating yourself about things that you'd like to know more about. Even YouTube, my brother learned about how to do a garden bed on YouTube in a 15-minute tutorial. He went and got the materials and it was done.
I love it.
So yeah, that's the third thing I'd say is you're, infinitely capable of achieving things.
Right.
And we all have that capacity. So simply remembering that.
Yes, I love that. We are powerful beyond measure is what one of my teachers, Marianne Williamson, often says. And she was also part of one of our summits this weekend. And she's got this quote, actually it was Nelson Mandela that started, but, who are we to play small? We're a star from the universe and powerful beyond measure. So I think with that, what I'd like to do, it'll take just a second or two. I'm going to do a screen share. I want those that will be viewing this to take a look at what you've been working on for 5 years with the trailer. And then we'll come back just to answer a few more questions. So just stand by here and I'm going to find your trailer. So,
Okay, great. Thank you so
yeah,
much for this.
yeah. Well, this is, I love everything that you have shared with us. It's the words that need to be heard in this time, definitely. So let's see, Google Chrome Crew. We want Facebook. Hold on. And when you, let's see, we don't want our shares here, but here it is, Roots Awaken. And I'm going to start it right here.
Humanity has reached a great crossroads.
We are entering the time of the fifth world. Es el tiempo de la oscuridad, el tiempo del origen.
I travel from the Andes to the Amazon to confront the black snake, the pipeline that is slithering across the earth and strangling the land.
World's worst oil-related disaster. Reckless oil exploration poisoned the most important rainforests on Earth. La Amazonía es el corazón del mundo. Estamos conociendo que esa semilla del origen está en nosotros.
Now is the time for the roots of humanity to awaken. Unite with indigenous people to protect the sanctity of life.
Oh, I got chills the entire time. This is so, so beautiful. Would you share what your vision is with the film? What do you want to see happen with the film?
Yeah, you know, it's been quite a journey for 5 years, and I think the hardest thing has been having to condense it. You know, it's like I couldn't include everything. I had to actually eliminate 90% of what I filmed to come to this. So, but you know, I've been through such an individual human revolution through this process that it's been you know, a lot. That now one of my visions that I'd like to keep sharing all of these different lessons, you know, with others like we're doing now. And then with the film, you know, I want people to realize the sanctity of life, all of life. So we are life, and we're also one with our environment. So the Amazon is one example, but for me, it's the most important because we reached a tipping point. And what that means is with the amount of deforestation in the Amazon, in the next few years, if we continue at the rate that we are, what's going to happen is there's this point where you literally tip, and the water systems are going to begin to collapse and permanently change the weather cycles. So Africa, the Sahara Desert used to be rain, you know, used to be forest actually, and there was this tipping point in the desert. So that's why I've chosen the Amazon, is because all of humanity relies on it for the survival of our species at this time. If we cut the entire rainforest, it's going to be detrimental. So that's why I want to bring awareness to the importance of the Amazon, and that the indigenous people living there are our best hope to protect it. They've lived there for thousands of years. They're our stewards. So by aligning with them as brothers and sisters, and you know, realizing that you know, they're important allies. So many people see, I don't know, many people have different relationships with indigenous people, but I mean, we're all, like I said, we're all one, we're all the same. But just honoring them for living in these territories, for their traditions, for their ways of life, and not trying to change them or you know, tell them what to do, but just honoring them. That's another one. And then the third one is I would like to raise awareness through this film to create what I call an impact center, which is going to be the center here in the Amazon for education, and a point for all nations and all races to come together to have access to the plant medicines, have access to workshops, educational retreats, and a point for the indigenous people from different tribes to come together and make alliances. So imagining ecological cabanas, 100% sustainable energy, and that's the next vision. So basically the film is like this springboard into this vision of this space of union for all people. And I think that we need these spaces all over the world. I know we need one in Sedona, we need one in LA, we need them all over, and they're points of interconnection. And you know, some people say eco-village, I don't know, there's so many different terms out there, but it's essentially a new community where we can almost see it as a rainbow. All the different, you know, belief systems are accepted in this one space. So I want to create, I want to create something like that as a actual concrete action step. So that's the bigger vision, but for the message of the film, it's just essentially for people to wake up to the sanctity of life.
I love this. Impact Center vision. Whoops. We have echo going. Well, that can be another interview. And what I did want to say, is the eco village. What could and will bring us all together is to have a common eco village. So, I'm not sure why the echoes just started to happen, but the last thing I want to say is how can we stay in touch? Is to have. Would you like to share your? So, I want to say is how can we stay in touch?
Great. I don't know if it's cutting out, but yeah, you can go to the website www.theroootsawaken.com and sign up for the newsletter so you can see the film when it's finished and you can stay connected. I'm on Facebook, Kumiko Hayashi. You can write to me on the website. There's a slot for email. And also, I'll be posting several blog article posts a week. And so those are on the website, and they're all different articles around these topics that we've discussed. So stay up to date by, clicking on the site and linking in with the newsletter. You'll get all of those articles as well.
That's fabulous. And I'll be sure when I post this. I'm going to end the meeting because I'm losing my voice and we have an echo, but thank you. Thank you. All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay, rootsawaken.com.